Lauren is a 2021 graduate. Has it been that long?
I know it's crazy to think about it.
Right. Okay. So she majored in communication and media studies. She works right now for the CMI Media Group as a senior media planner, which is in healthcare marketing, right, Lauren?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I know a lot of our students are really interested in this. So Lauren's worked at the CMI Group for almost 3 years now. And she started as an associate media planner. I'm sure she's going to tell us all about that. But I want to tell you more about her time at St. Joe's. She was an athletic communications student assistant during her time here. She also participated in Apex. But frankly, I don't know how she did that because she was incredibly busy during her time at the Communication and Media Studies Department. She was a student in the Beautiful Social Research Collaborative. And then she held a leadership position as a fellow for 2 years. And her official title was the John Cardinal Foley Program for Media and Civic Engagement Fellow within the Beautiful Social Research Collaborative. So that's a huge mouthful. She led teams of students who consult with nonprofit organizations on digital media projects. So Lauren combined her research in emerging communication technologies with social justice, to ally with community partners such as Life After Life and Design Justice UK. And this led her to conduct advanced research as a summer scholar in 2020 during the pandemic. And she received the highest honors in all of her courses, including a Kami Award for her work in nonprofit communications. And she is also one of the select few to receive the department's highest honor, which is the Communication and Digital Media Award. So I'm very excited to welcome Lauren back. And Lauren, I'm going to have a list of questions for you, and that'll be followed up by some Q&A from our students.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Okay, so let's get started. We're going to begin with some career-focused questions. So, okay, within your current role, can you just describe your core responsibilities and maybe what a typical day or a typical week looks like for you?
Yeah, for sure. So as I mentioned, I am a senior engagement or media planner at CMI Media Group, which is a pharmaceutical marketing agency. So it's essentially what it sounds like. So we plan the digital media campaigns for different pharmaceutical brands. So it's not the creative aspect. It's not like a creative agency where you're developing the creative assets, but rather we're working with the client and with different suppliers and partners on deciding where they should be running their digital media campaigns. So with what partners and what type of advertising they should be doing on these different channels. So that's the first part of the job. So once those campaigns are planned, part of my job is actually executing the campaigns. So we work closely with the supplier partners. So when I say that, think of like your WebMDs of the world and different healthcare related sites where we would actually be running these advertising assets. And then we work to contract and execute the actual campaigns on their sites with them. And then the last part of our job is just monitoring the performance of these campaigns and then making any optimizations based on what we see performing well, where we see engagement. And then we also work with the creative agency who is hired by the pharma brand that we're working for. And we work with them to get the media assets that they're creating live in market. And then we also work with them if we see something performing really well, or if we don't see performance as anticipated, we work with them to come up with recommendations on different types of creative to develop moving forward, what to switch into market, and what to take out. So it's basically just a huge collaboration of a bunch of different teams working together to get these digital media campaigns that you see live on different websites, different social media and stuff like that.
Awesome. You say it's not the creative side, but it still sounds really innovative to me.
Yeah, and we still have part of our job is really making those recommendations on what type of messaging would work best for the audience and the demographic you're trying to reach. So even though it's not developing the actual asset, you still are having those conversations, and you still have a part in all of that, which is really cool.
Right. Well, it sounds like you've been doing it forever already, but what made you decide to pursue this path?
Yeah, so I always knew, especially with the type of work that we were doing in comm, and then I also had a marketing minor and graphic design minor. I always knew I liked the planning consulting aspect of what we were doing at comm, especially with Be Social. It was a lot of that. So I knew that that's where a lot of my strengths was kind of leading those type of projects. But where I wasn't sure if I wanted to take more of the creative route or the more business strategy side of it, because comm is very creative focused. And then having graphic design, I was like, oh, maybe I do want to do that professionally. I wasn't sure where I wanted to land with that. And then when I was doing my first year of work, I actually had like a freelancing creative like job with actually the Jesuit School Network, where I was doing some creative projects for them. And I like quickly came to realize that my creative style is very like singular and very focused. So I was like, okay, maybe this isn't something that I want to be doing professionally, but I actually had someone who I was in a bunch of group projects with in comm reach out to me because they worked at CMI, and they were just like, hey, knowing the way that you work and the type of person you are like on a team, I think you would really like what we're doing. And I think you would really do well at the job. So that's why I ended up applying, and then it kind of just stuck. So yeah, that's how I ended up at CMI.
So is your network working for you?
Yeah.
So was this someone like another student of ours or what?
Yeah, so it was Lily D'Angelo actually.
Oh, of
So
course.
she was actually, I was the fellow of her Be Social group our senior year, I believe. And then we were in the same graphic design class, and we were in the same group planning like a COVID campaign and creating it. So we worked really closely together that last year at school, and she was just like, knowing the way you work, you would really like suit this job well.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. We'll have to bring her back too.
Yes, definitely. She's also still at CMI, 3 years strong, I think.
Amazing. Okay. I bet that was cool to know someone there.
Yeah, we have a really big like SJU alum presence, which is really cool as well. I don't know if anyone on the line did the SJU career day that they had at CMI, but there were a ton of people. So it's refreshing to see that type of having that community like within your work community is really nice too.
100%. Well, that's fantastic. Okay, next question. What has surprised you the most about your job?
I think what surprised me the most is how quickly you learn. Like transparently, I knew nothing about pharma marketing before, or just the pharma industry in general before working at CMI. So the first meeting I sat in, I was like listening to the client talk with my team, and I was like, I have no idea what's going on right now. It's a lot, but now 2.5 years in, I'm leading those client calls, and I'm the one having those conversations, and I'm the one making the recommendations, and kind of the one really involved in all of it. And I think looking back at myself when I started and seeing myself where I'm at now, you don't think you're ever going to be at that point when you start. So it's a really cool experience to be able to see how much you've learned just like about digital media in general too, and just like it's an ever evolving industry. So just really being a part of it is really neat.
That's amazing. Like, you're right. How does that go from like someone with a beginner's mind and maybe overwhelmed to just like a couple years later, like really being a leader? How does that happen?
It honestly happens naturally. I think when I started, the person who trained me, he was like, it's going to sound crazy to say, but probably the first 3 months of the job, you're going to be like, what is going on? And then one day it just clicks. And I think a lot of it is just sitting in on all of these conversations and just putting in the extra legwork to just learn more about the industry itself and just about the brands you're working for is like insanely beneficial to the job. And it's so worth it, even if it is a little extra work, because it'll get you to that place so much quicker. And I think the nice thing about CMI is they have a clear development plan of what the next step is and a clear timeline of like, here are the things you need to do to hit the next step. So to be able to go from an associate planner to a senior planner in the span of 2 years, I think it's just a product of the agency itself and kind of their care for like the personal development of the people who work for them too.
Mhm. That's really nice to know that that's there for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, my next question is this: how did you get your first internship or job? I think you covered some of that already. Is there anywhere you want to take that?
Yeah, my first internship, aside from like Be Social, I obviously got through just being involved in comm, and Summer Scholars was through that as well. But my senior year, I took I don't know if they still have it. It was like a social media influencers class, with Paula Levine was the professor at the time who was running it. And senior year after that course, she reached out to me, and she was like, hey, I know this nonprofit organization called Legacy of Hope. They kind of need a digital media consultant or a social media consultant. Would you be interested in just doing some like free work for them? So we did a lot of the stuff that we do in comm with like the design personas for them. I worked with Sam Jenkins on it actually, but that was like the first like internship I had outside of St. Joe's. And it was just from a professor who I developed like a relationship with just during a course, reaching out with an opportunity that came up. So again, it's just like building that network within the department, really helped me get the opportunities that I got.
I love that. I didn't know that. I think Paula's no longer teaching for us, but we have similar type courses. But it's great to hear about how much happens through who we know in our communities and the energy we put into them. So I think that's a really good message. Thank you. Okay. What are ways that your organization or industry demonstrate a commitment to DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah. So I think CMI as an agency and a company itself does a really good job at committing themselves to diversity and inclusion, especially when it comes to digital media. So we have a diversity and inclusion council who they're a major resource of just ensuring that the agency is consistently working towards inclusive media. So like an example of some of the things that they do is last year we had an agency day, which it's essentially different suppliers and partners come in for the full day. And the full day is like blocked off to just learning about their opportunities and capabilities. But they had a day that was like strictly dedicated to partners who focus on marginalized communities and just health inequities within those communities. So essentially all the content that they're creating and that they're focused on is about that. And so they had a day of them presenting all of the different capabilities and just programs that we could potentially be running within our campaigns to ensure that we're keeping those communities top of mind. And then coming out of that, it wasn't just like oh, here's some like different partners to just like learn about. They said like they're setting a goal of a certain percent of campaigns across the agency who are like utilizing these type of partners just to make sure that the agency's accountable of ensuring that like we're keeping all different types of people top of mind. And then I think in the industry in general, with it being an ever-changing, just like digital media itself, it's always evolving. I think you need to have people in leadership positions who are focusing on how these advances are affecting all people. So for example, one of my former VPs, who's still a VP at CMI, he spoke at South by Southwest about how to keep prejudice out of AI. So obviously AI is becoming this big thing in digital media, and having someone at the top of leadership who's like, okay, AI is obviously very cool, but like, how do we ensure that it's not negatively impacting certain people? Like, I think it's important to ensure the people who are running your companies are thinking about those things in an industry that's constantly changing too.
Yeah, and I bet that speaks to you, like helps you get aligned with their like the mission, like I think you said you don't want to work somewhere that doesn't align with your personal mission and things. So I can see how, even though it's not a nonprofit, they're, doing such, work aligned. It's very Jesuity, right?
Yeah, and CMI specifically, I'm sure a lot of other companies do this too, but they have like service days as well, where I think there are two throughout but you can do as many as four, but you take the day off and it reminds me a lot of St. Joe's, of like dedicating time to actually doing like physical service in the Philadelphia community. So it's nice to still have that type of connection, because I think it's easy to fall off of that type of stuff once you graduate, and you kind of have to find opportunities on your own. So having a company that ensures people are prioritizing it is huge.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Thank you. Okay, so next question. Well, just let me preface this by saying I feel like you took advantage of everything available to you at St. Joe's. But the question is, what is something that you wish someone told you while you were in school?
I think when I obviously think about where I've landed, I think if you told like freshman year me I'd be working in like pharma marketing, I probably would have been like, no. But but a big stress for me during St. Joe's was I started undecided too. I was like, oh, maybe I'll start with social work. And then I was like, no, I think like digital media is more my thing. And then I was like, let me add marketing and let me add graphic design. So my journey at St. Joe's was a constantly changing experience. And I never had a set idea of what I wanted to do. Even come graduation, I was like, we'll see like where I end up. And I think someone told me like, that's okay. I think it's easy to get stressed out when you see people around you who have a very specific track, being like, I know what I'm doing when I'm graduating. It's easy to get stressed out by that. And I wish someone was like, it's okay to not have a full idea. It's, there's something exciting about being able to try different jobs, even if I'm lucky that my first job worked out as positively as it did. But even just trying some different things, figuring out what works, figuring out what doesn't. And then you'll end up where you're supposed to be, and you'll learn from it. So yeah, it would have been nice to know that like everything worked out when I was stressing about it.
Yeah, I see the graduating seniors' faces right now, some of them, and it's happening right now, right? The stress. They have a friend who's got a job and they feel the pressure that they too need a job to know everything right now. And I think that's wonderful advice. So thank you. Uh, I feel like that's what students need to hear. Okay, so what are 2 to 3 experiences students, in your opinion, should engage in while in school to help prepare them for entering the field after graduation?
Yeah, I think just anything where you're exposed to an environment outside the classroom. So whether it's like service learning, Apex, an internship, a job just on campus. Like I worked for the athletic department for all 4 years while I was at St. Joe's, and it had nothing to do with what I do now, but just exposing yourself to either like a professional environment where you're acting as not a student, but you're acting as an adult, like in the real world. Um, it gives you an idea of what post-grad life is going to be like and what it is to act in a professional environment, or just even with the service opportunities St. Joe's has, just exposing yourselves to different communities of people and just an environment and a world outside of the classroom. It just is massively beneficial regardless of where you end up. You're always going to be working with different people, and in like a real world environment. So as much as you can get yourself in those experiences at like when you're at St. Joe's, definitely take advantage of it. Even if you're like, oh, that doesn't exactly relate to what I want to be doing post grad, it's still, you're going to gain something from the experience.
I think that's fantastic advice. And, it just made me think, Lauren, like, I don't know, like maybe it's the pandemic. Like, I don't feel like some people haven't fully recovered. And like there's a big bias to kind of hide behind screens, or, like there's a lot of people like even with their camera off right now, like it's just kind of like it's become more accepted to do that. And I think at the expense of, like you said, putting yourself out there, even if it has nothing to do with what you're going to do, it teaches you some life skills. There's networking, learning how to communicate better. I don't know, it's just a trend we're a little bit concerned with in the department, right? Like just kind of what we're seeing. And we wonder like, well, what will happen next? Will there be like a shift, and all of a sudden people will just really want to be face to face and really want to spend that time together. Not sure.
Yeah, I think it's definitely shifting. Like, because I started work where it was fully remote. So for the first
Mhm.
like 3 months of my job, I talked to my direct team, and then I didn't meet any of them in person until 3 months in. So, and I think at that point, it was really easy for me to just do the brand work and do the teamwork and not like
Yeah.
push myself outside of that, because I was like, oh, like you don't get that full feeling. But now companies are going back to being like in person, at least like flexing. And it's scary, but you do just have to like throw yourself into it, and it'll give you the confidence to, do all the different types of things that you want to be doing anyways, and just vouch for yourself like in your professional career as well, which is really important.
I think I think you hit it. I think a lot of it has to do with confidence, right? Like, yeah, and building that up like in person again, and with people. And
No, definitely.
thank you for that. That's perfect. Okay, so you've hit on this in different ways, but I'll just ask you explicitly, what communications courses did you take that helped prepare you for the job market, either directly or indirectly?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one for me, obviously, like being very involved in it, was be social. And I think, as you mentioned, like it's obviously very different, like working with a nonprofit client versus working with like a pharma brand client. But it is the most similar situation that I had at like in my like education career to what I'm doing now, of getting that exposure of working with an actual client on a digital media project and consulting and planning it. But I think in general, like even if you don't have the opportunity to do Be Social, or it's not a course that you've taken, I just think any course, and I know comm is very like collaborative and very like group work, teamwork focused. So any course that you're working with a group on a group project it's going to help you regardless of the job you get post grad, because most jobs you're going to be working on a team of people, and it's really important to understand like how to navigate different personalities and how to manage work and collaborate. So I would just say I feel like sometimes you're like, wait, why are we doing so many like group projects? But it is going to be your life post grad. for most of the different types of jobs you'll be going into. So I would say all of them.
Thank you. I mean, that's by design. That is why we do group work, to, prepare people for the job market where you're working on a team almost always, right? That is the main reason. So thank you for that. And thank you for the Be Social plug. There's a lot of folks here in Be Social currently, so I think it's fun for them to see someone who just graduated a few years ago and what's happened with them. Okay, I have a few more questions. Okay, so we talked about the courses. So what other experiences, or you talked about internships, you did a summer scholars project. Was there other things like service learning courses, study abroad, any kind of experiential learning, anything that helped you prepare for this role?
Yeah, I think it's kind of goes back to my other answer of just honestly, like all of it. I did like the service learning courses. I did like weekly service. I did APEC. Like I really just like tried to immerse myself in as much of it as I could and just get the most out of the experience. And obviously, like Jesuit education is very different than if you were to go to a different university. And I think there's a lot to learn from the way that they position education and the opportunities that they have. But yeah, I would just say like at least involving yourself in something outside of what you're doing. Like I was like the Gaelic football team manager at St. Joe's, and that's so random, but it was just a nice way to like meet a new group of people and just do something different. And again, it was one of those situations of pushing yourself out of your comfort zone by signing up for something totally unfamiliar. And I think don't do it to like put it on the resume, like do it for yourself. And you'll meet a ton of people from it, and you never know what's going to come out of that. Like I literally got my first job from a classmate. So you just never know like who you're going to meet through these type of things. So yeah, I would say just get involved in the things that you find interesting, more so than the things that you think are going to look good on paper.
I love that. Just go for what interests you, not like what's going to look good on your resume.
Yeah.
I love that quote. Okay. You mentioned like being, Jesuit educated. So how do you think that impacts the work you do or the decisions you've made so far in your career?
Yeah, I was thinking about this one a little bit. I think it massively plays a part in the way I interact with people on an everyday basis. Like my whole job is just collaborating with clients, creative agencies, people within my internal like company, and then different suppliers and partners. And I think just understanding like you're spending 8 hours a day with these people, like treat each other with respect and grace. And I think a big thing about like people think when they think agency work is it's super cutthroat and super high pressure, but that's just not the case at CMI at least. And I think there's everyone has that common and mutual respect for each other. And I even like with the clients and stuff. So I think the way that St. Joe's taught me to interact with people through like that Jesuit lens is very much, it comes across the way that I work with people, even though like pharma marketing isn't necessarily like the same as the stuff that I was doing at St. Joe's. I think you can still see it come through in the way that I like go about my like professional career at the agency.
It's the cura personalis, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's like, do I want to say what I really want to say to this person, or do I want to think about how I'm going to be working with this person for the next 5 to 10 years? And I don't need to say that right now.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. You have to think about how you want to be talked to and just talk to people that way.
Yeah, it's a really good trait to keep in mind. I don't think everyone does, so that's really lovely. Okay, so what advice would you give to current students right now as they're thinking about the job market? I know we hit on this a little bit. Is there anything else you want to add about that?
I would just say, like, again, just put yourself out there, even when you have things like this. If it's something you're interested in, like, connect on LinkedIn with the people you're talking to, send them a message, ask questions. You never know who can help lead you to an opportunity, and definitely, like, don't hesitate to reach out to your professors as well. If you have an idea of certain things that you're interested in, they can always help as a resource and at least trying to guide you in the right direction. And then, yeah, just get to know the people in your classes too. You also, like, obviously never know where that can end up. So I think just maintaining a network, post grad, I think it's easy to fall off. Like, once you graduate, it's easy to lose contact. But just keep a strong network around you, and it's also a strong support system as you're going through more stressful situations, which is always important to have.
Yeah, perfect. Are there any types of internships that you think comm students should be looking for?
I think it definitely depends on like what it is that you want to do, but I think honestly any internship is a good internship. It's either going to tell you like, oh, this is something I want to do, or it's going to tell you this is something I don't want to do. Like my internship it wasn't paid, so it was just strictly for the experience and just kind of doing work for a nonprofit and just continuing on with that. But it taught me a lot about what it takes to do that type of work for a client and a brand. So I think even if you're doing different things like any service opportunities, or if you're in Be Social, the different partners you're working with after the fact, you can, if they need extra help or support, you can always reach out and just be like, hey, I'd love to be able to do like this type of project for you guys if you guys were willing. Because again, it's something to put on the resume as actual like experience. So I would just say if an opportunity comes up, if you see something on LinkedIn, or I know you guys use Handshake, I believe was the SJU platform. If you find it slightly interesting and you're looking for an internship and you have the bandwidth and time, I would say just go for it. Because then if you end up not enjoying it, it's still experience. And then you can always like transition to something else.
Right. I think that's excellent. Thank you. I know that students are either doing that right now, looking for internships. And I love the advice like, hey, why don't you try to create your own? Reach out to the person that, interests you. Contact your dream job, ask them if, you can make an internship. I love that. The other part of the folks are, people who are graduating and are, looking to interview, right? So you gave us some great networking tips. Do you have any interviewing tips?
Yeah, honestly, like interviewing was probably the most stressful part of, I think for anyone, it's intimidating. And I think you naturally feel the need to like really sell yourself to the companies you're interviewing with, but like you need to just come off authentic. You don't want to come off like you're trying too hard, because at the end of the day, it's obviously like these companies interviewing you, but you also have to think of it with the lens of it's you interviewing these companies as well. Like you don't want to get a job and work somewhere that isn't a good fit for you. So you don't want to be trying to put on this certain type of like personality or facade because you just want to land the job. You want to genuinely make sure it's somewhere that's well suited for you. Like I know for CMI specifically, when I interviewed, at least it was the first two interviews were very much like, here's your resume, here's who you are on paper. And it was like, okay, yeah, experience. And then the last two interviews were with two different teams. And it was just very much about like how my personality worked with their teams and like where I would fall the best. And you just have to make sure that you feel comfortable and good as well. And the only way that you're gonna get that like gut feeling is if you're being yourself in interviews. I'm someone who like I've definitely gotten better at public speaking as I continue to grow, but it's definitely something it's easy to get like very like choked up and nervous, but just remember to breathe, do your research before an interview. You never want to go in blind and have no idea what you're interviewing for, but if you genuinely have questions, ask them too. If like the job description is a little vague, just ask like, hey, what more does this entail? Like specifics, because you want to make sure that you're signing up for something that you're going to be happy with, because you are spending 8 hours a day in that position. So you definitely don't want to like dread going to work.
I love that you're interviewing them as much as, you know, they're interviewing you. Uh, I think that's really good to keep in mind. And I think interviewing is, you know, one of the most stressful things, no matter what your age, no matter what your experience. You know, my husband just turned 50. He just got a job at a nonprofit. You know, he left his job at Penn for 17 years. And he even used some of the tips that we talked about in Be Social for interviewing. You know, like uh, he had to study up on how to interview again. It's really stressful.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
would say if you feel like if you're feeling worried about like lack of experience, if you're someone who didn't necessarily have a bunch of internship opportunities, you can take so much of what I did in my interviews was taking things that I learned in like comm and marketing courses and using those examples. Like I used Be Social, obviously. I took if anyone is also involved in marketing, I took marketing strategy. So I used that. We did like a simulation on marketing. In that, I used that. It was like a class, but I used that as an example. You can totally find physical like ways that you fit into the job, even if you feel like you have a lack of like industry experience. So definitely don't get too hung up on that. Just like think of it, get creative with it, and just have like real examples to use.
That's awesome advice. Thank you. I'm sure folks really appreciate it. Um, I think we're going to do some Q&As right now. Like I said, our Be Social class is here as well. And you worked with Life After Life, right? And that means like Stacy Torrance is still with us with the Free Mind Entrepreneur Network. So I know you know him. I mean, he's not here, but the group working with him is here. I think that's really cool that you all have worked with the same person.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's so awesome.
Yeah, he's a legend. So I don't know, we could open up to Q&A. Would anyone like to talk to Lauren? Say hi. I'm
Essa?
Amanda.
Hi. So I had two questions actually. The first one was, I know you mentioned that you had a connection with the place that you work right now, but was there anything else when you were going through like interviews and things like that, like the job process that you think helped you stand out from other or not competitors, but like other candidates, I guess, for the job?
I think I think just making sure that I think a little goes a long way too in terms of effort and just showing that you're enthusiastic about jobs. So before your job, just if you know there's a company you want to work for, you can even go on LinkedIn, see people who work for that company, either like in the talent acquisition department or just in general, if they work for like the type of position you want to be hiring for, you can just send them a message and be like, hey, I'm really interested in your company. I like love what you guys do. Can you tell me a little bit more about your day to day? Or just following up with the people who interview you and just being like, thank you so much for taking the time. Looking forward to hearing from you guys. It just shows professionalism, and it also shows that you're like really actually interested and you're not just doing a bunch of interviews, which like you might be, but still you want to come off as like, this is like something that I really want. So I think just putting in that little extra effort always helps, and they'll remember your name, and they'll remember you as they're considering people for the position.
Thank you. And then my second question was, I'm in my capstone right now, my capstone, and I was wondering if you spoke a lot about that when you were going through like job applications, and if you think that that helped you out with it.
Yeah, I'm like blanking. I don't know. Yeah, okay. I was gonna say, I don't think we had a capstone when I was at St. Joe's. But I did speak a lot about just my experience, like I did summer scholars with COM, and then obviously getting the communications award and everything like that. I did tie it all back to like my experience. So I definitely, depending on what it is that you're doing, I think it's definitely something you could utilize in your interviews, especially because it is more, I'm assuming it is like a lot more like research focused and everything like that. So I would definitely take advantage of it, especially because it's something you know a lot about because you're doing a whole capstone on it.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Um,
Yeah, we started that a couple years ago, Lauren.
that's cool.
To give them some, time and space to develop like a portfolio project or, something substantial that's more independent. Juliet, how are you? Any questions?
Question is, what is the most challenging aspect of your role and what is the most rewarding aspect?
Yeah. I honestly think the most challenging aspect of my role is, I'm trying to think. Honestly, I think this is like a little more analytical, but I when I'm looking at like data and like performance of the different programs and stuff, there's still so much for me to learn in that department. And I think part of my job is making optimizations off of that and being able to speak to like the different partners and programs that we're working with and using the data to back it up. So I think that when I'm presenting that to marketers and the client who have been in the industry for many more years than myself, it's easy to get a little like, it's easy to second guess yourself, but I think the most rewarding thing is that when you do those client presentations and it pays off in a positive way, it's so rewarding to be like, okay, yeah, I do know what I'm talking about. And like, these people do respect me and they do respect my opinion, and like the recommendation that I'm putting forward. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword there of you're nervous about it, but then when it goes well, it's really rewarding to know like, okay, yeah, I know what I'm doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great question. I can totally see that. Like you're new and, like, oh, who am I to tell these people who've been here a long time? But at the same time, you're fresh out of school and you have knowledge that they might not have, that they wish they had. So I really think that is important to point out. So thank you. Great question.
Yeah. I
Anyone
saw
else?
that.
Go ahead.
I saw that Mike had a chat about, could you talk a little more about the difference between agency work and in-house work? This might be confusing for folks on the job market. Yeah, so when I say I work for an agency, it means we are outsourced by a pharma brand. So CMI itself is not like the pharmaceutical marketing agency or the pharmaceutical marketing brand. It's the agency that they hire to plan their media campaigns. So the work that we're doing isn't for CMI. Like it's not like, oh, we're placing advertisements for CMI. It's like, oh, we're placing and planning advertisements for X, Y, and Z brand. And like same thing where it's not the creative agency where they're creating the actual like brands and media assets, and they're making those creative assets. We essentially collaborate with them and take the assets that they're creating and we put them in the different media outlets that we planned. So it's different than doing like in-house work because you're being like outsourced to do the work for clients, basically. I hope that answers the question.
Any other questions for Lauren or comments while we still have her? Let's see. Oh yeah, Mike posted the LinkedIn group. So yeah, this is one of the LinkedIn group is one of the ways, one of the only ways we can track people, you know, once they've graduated, right? Like you lose the St. Joe's email. We have never received anything from, you know, the university telling us really where you are, what you're doing. It's, you know, it's kind of, as far as I know, it's, you know, the LinkedIn, the Be Social LinkedIn and the Com LinkedIn is a way to keep in touch still, and, you know, keep up the network like Lauren was saying is so important. Okay, any other last chance for questions? Lauren, maybe you can come back and join us in person sometime.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I would be happy to. I didn't even realize until I got this invite. Like I was like, oh my gosh, it's been 2 years. Like it's crazy how fast it goes. But I'm always around, always welcome. If anyone has any other questions, I'll join that LinkedIn group actually, just to keep in contact with you guys, and then just students too, if they're a part of it. But no, I appreciate everyone taking the time. Thanks for having me.
It was wonderful seeing you and talking to you.
Yes, definitely.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks all. Thanks for being here.